I think we're ready to start whenever you guys are.
All right, court is now in session. Are there any pretrial matters?
Yes, Your Honor, but first may we make appearances?
Certainly.
I, along with my co-counsel, Katie Epson,
Good afternoon.
and Tyler,
How you doing?
represent the plaintiff in today's case. We'd also like to give you a copy of the complaint, answer and counterclaim, reply to counterclaim, stipulations, pretrial orders, exhibit lists, and the Midlands Rules of Evidence.
You may approach attendant. I will remind the attorneys that if you refer to a rule of evidence or a case law, that you tell me what page and the name of the case or number of the rule, so I have a chance to look at it before I vote.
Yes, sir.
We'd also like to invoke Rule 615, the constructive sequestration of all witnesses barring party representatives. Today our party representative is Ms. Alex Grace.
Could be me.
Could have.
And we'd like to ask your preferences about moving about the well, approaching opposing counsel, approaching the witness.
My well is your well. Just move freely about the room. You don't have to ask to approach anybody or anything.
Your Honor, may the defense make party appearances?
Are you finished?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Dylan McCloskey, and along with my co-counsel Audrey Pham
Good afternoon, Your
Good
Honor.
afternoon.
and Stephen Walt,
Good afternoon, Mr. Wall.
we'll be representing the defendant in today's case, and the defendant is Ms. Danny Kozak.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ms. Kozak.
The only item that we have to address, Your Honor, is that Ms. Danny Kozak is our party representative as well, and will be in trial throughout this afternoon.
Okay.
And then we're ready to proceed.
All right, then we were pretty ready to proceed with what would be called opening statements, and we'll remind the jury that this is not to be considered evidence. With that being said, Mr. Lawson, is that right?
Yes, sir.
You may proceed, sir.
May I proceed?
You may.
May it please the court, members of the jury, opposing counsel, you can't teach an old monkey new tricks. Alex Grace and the Midlands TV Studios decided to have Elias on their show after seeing his viral success. At a pre-rehearsal, to make sure that Elias was comfortable on set, Elias began screeching violently and aggressively. At one point during the pre-rehearsal show, he ran over to the victim, Chris Villafana, jumped on him and started clawing at his neck and his arms. Unfortunately, Chris Villafana passed away due to injuries he sustained from Elias. We, the plaintiff, are suing for negligence for the defendant Danny Kozak not having Elias properly trained. The elements of negligence in our jurisdiction are a duty owed by the defendant to the plaintiff, the breach of that duty, harm suffered by the plaintiff, and the direct and proximate cause of the harm suffered by the plaintiff due to the defendant breaching his duty. To show you that he breached his duty, we will do this through the preponderance of evidence, meaning more likely than not that the defendant owed a duty of care to the plaintiff. Today we will call 3 witnesses to the stand. The first witness we will call is Alex Grace herself, the executive producer of Midlands After Dark with Alex Grace. She will tell you that she did everything in her power to make sure that everything was ready on set for Elias to be there. The second witness we will call is Dr. Willoughby Hawkins, who is an expert in his field of primatology and animal psychology. Dr. Hawkins will tell you how Elias was properly trained and ready to be on the set of Midlands After Dark. Lastly, we will call Harper Villafana, Chris Villafana's wife, or widow at this point. She will give you her account of how Mr. Kozak came to be on Midlands After Dark and how the death affected her. At the end of today's case, my co-counsel, Katie Espin, will come before you, and we hope, after hearing all the evidence, that you will find that Danny Kozak breached his duty of care that he owed to Midlands After Dark. And we hope we will show you through the preponderance of evidence that there was a breach of that duty, and that because of that breach, an innocent man lost his life. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, Your Honor, members of the jury, opposing counsel, may it please the court. Rules exist for a reason. They keep us safe and out of danger. And when you break the rules, you should be held accountable for that. Now, no one here denies that on June 29th, 2017, something tragic happened. A man lost his life in an attack. But what opposing counsel has failed to tell you thus far is that it was Alex Grace and Midlands Television Studios who cut corners, broke the rules laid out for them by Danny Kozak, endangered the lives of everyone on set, and led to the unfortunate death of Chris Villafana. Now, in order to better understand what happened on that day, we need to go back to 2013, when Danny Kozak met Elias, a 6-year-old chimpanzee. Danny adopted Elias from an animal sanctuary, and from that point on, Elias was a part of her family. Danny taught Elias to be a performer. Elias starred in over a dozen TV shows, went viral on YouTube, and even made it onto the silver screen. In 2017, Elias was booked for Midlands After Dark. Elias would be performing a brand new set of tricks that no one had ever seen before. Now, we anticipate today that opposing counsel will try to tell you that Elias was aggressive and untrained. But Danny Kozak spent hundreds of hours making sure that the opposite was true. She trained Elias to be on TV sets and got Elias used to the bright lights and loud noises of a set. And before appearing on Midlands After Dark, Danny Kozak sent out a list of 15 simple guidelines that everyone on set would need to follow. We anticipate that you're going to hear a lot about those guidelines today. First, the defense will call Remy Hollis, a band manager whose band was set to appear on Midlands After Dark that day. Remy Hollis will tell you that he didn't read the guidelines, and neither did any of his 6 band members. Next, the defense will call Ashley Thornhill, Alex Grace's personal makeup artist and assistant, who will tell you that the guidelines weren't necessarily distributed that day either. And finally, the defense will call Danny Kozak, who will tell you that even after sending out these guidelines, even after her personal assistant called Midlands Television Studios to review the guidelines, and even after she personally met with Alex Grace to clarify those rules, Midlands Television Studios failed to follow her instructions. Members of the jury, rules exist for a reason. They keep us safe and out of danger. Danny Kozak's rules were simple and easy to follow. And yet Midlands Television Studios failed to follow them. The plaintiff holds a burden today in their claim. They must prove to you by a preponderance of the evidence that 1, Danny Kozak failed in her duty to properly train Elias, and 2, that she did not sufficiently inform Midlands Television Studios of the risks of having an animal on set. A burden of the preponderance of the evidence means that when you, members of the jury, leave this courtroom to deliberate today, you will weigh the evidence that has been presented before you. The scales will tip to one side or the other, But in order for the plaintiff to win their claim, you must find the evidence at least 50% in their favor, a burden that the plaintiff will not be able to meet. We as the defense have also accepted a burden in our claim. We must prove to you that Midlands Television Studios failed to take otherwise sufficient steps to ensure the safety of members on set, and that they failed to follow the guidelines laid out by Danny Kozak. As we present evidence to prove our claim to you today, we simply ask you to consider 3 questions. 1, were the guidelines read by everyone on set that day? 2, were the guidelines followed by everyone on set that day? And 3, were the rules explicitly given by Danny Kozak on set followed on set that day? The answer to all 3 of these questions is no. And that's why at the end of today's trial, my co-counsel, Dylan McCloskey, will come before you and ask that you find Midlands Television Studios liable, because rules exist for a reason, and they failed to follow those rules. Thank you.
Plaintiffs ready to call their first witness?
Yes, sir. At this time, I'd like to call Harper Bilfana to the stand.
Mr. Ivana, I will remind you if you are on your. Mr. Lawson?
May I proceed?
Oh, look at him.
Oh. Could you please introduce yourself to the court, please?
My name is Harper Belfont.
What is your occupation?
Well, I worked as an entertainment reporter for the company Parsnips, but that was before my husband was killed in the accident. And afterwards, I became so depressed, I couldn't continue working.
Where did Chris work?
Chris was a writer on Midlands Television Studio for the show Midlands After Dark with Alex Grace.
Were you aware that Danny and Elias were going to be on the show?
I was around mid-June. I figured out that they were going to be on the show later that month. Sadly, I was the one that recommended that Kozak try to get in contact with them.
How did you come about recommending Kozak?
Well, Kozak sent out this request to have publication made about his sanctuary, and I was available. So in January 2016, I went and I talked to him. I found him and we sat down, and he told me that due to the success of Elias the chimpanzee, the sanctuary had come into a lot of cash, but due to expansion, they were afraid that the sanctuary was going to shut down.
So what exactly did he say what did he say to himself?
Well, whenever we were talking about the sanctuary, he was really concerned about it, and I realized I wasn't going to get a good story out of this because I was working in entertainment. So I asked him how dangerous it would be to work with a chimpanzee like Elias.
Okay. What were you doing on July 27th, 2017?
Well, on that day, I was. I'm sorry, are you sure on that day?
July 27th? Sorry, July 29th, 2017. The day of the incident.
On the day of the attack, Chris and I got up to go to work as we always do. We were saying our goodbyes. I arrived at work around 10.
Did you have any contact with Chris that day?
Well, every day around 2 during our lunch, we would always get in contact and call each other. And on that day, Chris called me at 2, and I was on the phone with the angry campaign manager, so I couldn't answer. He called again at 2:15, but I was still on the phone with him. But this time he left a voicemail.
Would you be able to recognize a copy of their voicemail?
I would.
Permission to approach our opposing counsel.
Don't have to ask permission to appoint anyone.
Would Your Honor like a second copy? So, do you recognize this, copy of the voicemail?
I do. It's the last time I heard Chris's voice.
This is a fair and accurate copy?
It is.
At this time, I would like to enter this exhibit into evidence.
Any objections?
Yes, objection, hearsay within hearsay.
Go ahead and explain.
This is an out of court statement. Used to prove the truth.
And you're saying it's hearsay within the hearsay?
Yeah.
Your response to hearsay within hearsay?
Your Honor, this is not hearsay, I believe rule of evidence 8026. 8026.
Wait a minute. Yes?
This is a regularly conducted activity, the voicemail between the man and his wife.
Okay, so what's your response to business records?
Yeah, so since it's referring to business records, we should only be looking at the top portion of the document, where it says message begins, and the portion underneath that, shouldn't be allowed. Because it's hearsay within hearsay.
Yeah, it is hearsay within hearsay, and I don't believe you've laid proper foundation for a business record.
Oh.
You may do so.
Oh, okay, well, I mean, alright, I'll proceed.
Okay.
Foundation. Let's see, let me go ahead and, ask, Ms. Villatana, may I have a second to
Absolutely.
Your Honor, I would, again, like to try to enter this into evidence. This is a report by Orca. This is a report by Orca, and it states, here that, it's a declaration by, under penalty of perjury.
Let me see what you're talking about. Hang on just a second. Yes, I think that would be helpful in laying the foundation, but I don't believe the foundation has been laid yet. You
Okay.
simply need to lay the foundation before you can refer to this under 8026.
All right, let's continue. Ms. Villatana, I know this has been very hard for you. I'd like to direct your attention to the day of the funeral. Can you tell us what happened?
Well, we wanted to just have a small funeral with just family and friends. somehow Midland's Television Studio and Danny Kosak learned of this, and whenever I saw Danny, I was angry because Danny said that she could have done something, that she should have done better, that you could have stopped this.
No further questions.
Mr. Wall, I suppose you want cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed. Counsel, this is not any.
Ms. Harper, how would you describe the relationship with Chris and Midland's Television Studios?
Well, like I said, Chris worked there. He was a writer, and they would get in contact with him for work-related things.
Did Chris ever, well, you stated that before that Chris often would get phone calls in the middle of the night at various times, and you can characterize this Midland's Television Studios as very disorganized. Is that correct?
Yeah, I suppose so.
May I confer with my counsel?
Certainly.
Ms. Harper, just reiterating, so you characterized Midland Television Studios as a disorganized place of work, correct?
I never had direct contact with Midlands often, but from a couple of instances, I could see it.
But isn't it correct that you have previously stated and characterized Midland Television Studios as a disorganized place to work?
From the brief encounters, yeah.
Thank you. And is it also true that from talking with Chris and your encounters with the incident, that you knew that the show was not prepared as a studio for a live animal act?
Well, the last time that I heard from Chris, he was talking about how worried he was about the show and how that he felt like Kosak was incompetent of what was going to happen. And I know he was just very worried about what was going to happen, and I guess now we know why.
So that was a yes, that you felt that Midland's Television Studio was not prepared to have a live animal act occur that day, right?
I suppose so.
And no further questions, Your Honor.
Let me redirect Mr. Lawson.
No, Your Honor.
I didn't hear you. Thank you.
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Just trying to keep you. That's right. You may step down, ma'am. Thank you so much for your testimony. Mr. Barnyard, is that right? Looks like Barnyard. I'm sorry. Who put that down?
My name wrong too. It wasn't my fault though. And Steve.
So it's Barnyard.
I didn't write. I seriously.
Barnyard.
But also,
Barnyard.
you pronounced my name wrong again in pre-trial matters, so I guess it
There's
was.
no Y there. That's right. It was on the list. Somebody messing with you, sir. Okay.
I shouldn't have laughed.
Might be me. Barnyard.
Yeah, this time would like they call Dr. Rose, he also sits down.
Dr. Hawkins, I will remind you, sir, you were under oath.
Dr. Hawkins, please state your name for the court.
My name is Dr. Willoughby Hawkins.
And what is your education?
Well, I received my bachelor's in animal psychology from the University of Tennessee from Chattanooga. And then I went and received my doctorate from Ohio State University in animal sciences with a focus in primatology.
And since then, what has been your occupation?
I'm currently the Amber Lowry Professor at Midland State University in the anthropology department, and I'm teaching multiple classes on animal psychology.
And have you ever been published?
I have. I've had many articles published, and most of which are highly relevant to the subject at hand today.
Okay, and have you ever testified in court before?
Yes, I have testified 25 times in trial, 14 for the plaintiff and 11 for the defense.
Dr. Hawkins, are you being compensated today?
Yeah, I received $300 per hour for my work, which is the standard rate in the field, and for being called to testify today, I received a flat fee of $5,000.
Now, Dr. Hawkins, did you have sufficient facts and data when reviewing today's case?
Yes, I did. I reviewed the affidavits of A.J. McClellan, as well as the depositions of Danny Kosak and Alex Grace, along with Exhibits 1, 2, 5 through 11, 14, and Exhibit 23.
And did you use common practices and methods commonly found in your field when reviewing today's case?
I did, yes. I'm using a process where I take statistical data and apply it to the different demographics of the different animal species.
And did you apply these methods and practices in today's case, into the facts of today's case?
Of course.
Now, Dr. Hawkins, why are you here today?
Well, I was retained by Midland's Television Studios to examine two main things. First, I am to examine the reliability of the choice of Danny Kosak for choosing Elias to appear on the Midland's Television Studio set, as well as the capability of Danny Kosak and her training procedures of Elias to perform and get ready for this show.
Now let's talk about Elias. You mentioned Elias. What is Elias?
Elias is pan troglodyte, commonly referred to as a chimpanzee. He's roughly 10 years old, male, and he was a performance chimpanzee trained by Danny Kosak. Elias was the chimpanzee that Midland's Television Studios had agreed to appear on the Midland's After Dark television show.
Now you mentioned performance chimpanzee. Now, could you tell us a little bit more about what goes into training a performance chimpanzee?
Well, of course, yeah. When I'm looking to see the quality of training and selection of the chimpanzee, I look at four main factors. I look at the chimpanzee's age, gender, previous environment, and any prior instances of aggression.
So let's work through some of these things you've just listed off. So the first one you mentioned was age. Can you tell us why age is an important factor when considering a performance chimpanzee?
Certainly. A chimpanzee, males hit puberty roughly around the age of 6 to 7. And at this time, this is when their bodies begin to fully mature and they develop features that make them far superior in physical strength to humans. Approximately, they have the muscle mass to do approximately 1.5 times more damage to a human that would be able to do damage. And this is when they are able to develop their canines, their fingernails grow larger, and as I previously mentioned, their muscle mass increases.
Now, Dr. Hawkins, what age was Elias?
Elias was 10 years old at the time of appearing on the show.
Now, Elias was 10. Is this problematic for Elias to be a performance chimpanzee?
Yes, the majority of chimpanzees that we see performing are infants, and this is mainly due to the fact that they are less capable of doing damage, less aggressive. They don't have those physical attributes that I mentioned develop in puberty. Simply speaking, numbers don't lie, folks. Out of the past 10 chimpanzee attacks in the past 5 years, only one of those chimpanzees was over the age of 10.
Now, you mentioned environment is a factor in performance chimpanzees. Could you expand a little bit on that for us?
Yeah, so it might seem counterintuitive, but the more time that chimpanzees spend interacting with humans, the more likely they are to engage in aggressive behavior. And this is due to the fact that the more time that a chimpanzee spends interacting with a human, the less likely they are to see the human physically superior to them. So if any reaction happens where they become agitated or feel that they might need to fight or flight, they're more likely to engage in the aggressive behavior because they have no fear about winning over the human.
Now you mentioned this aggression. How does aggression, why is this relevant for a performance chimpanzee?
Well, when you look at picking the right performance chimpanzee, if there's any instances of aggression that have happened in the past, it would not be a wise choice to put that animal in the same environment that agitated them previously.
And has this happened at all with Elias?
While I haven't seen any specific reactions similar to this, I did see one instance that caught my eye. It was on the Byron Fellows safari trip. Elias was interacting with a show host, and basically the agreed upon trick would be that Elias would throw his food, and the host would act angry and yell at Elias, which of course made the audience laugh. And it seemed that this laughter is what sparked Elias to become agitated. Elias started jumping up and down and beating on his chest and screeching. Now, this is what I like to call the startle reaction, and it's been noticed in chimpanzees for many years now.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the startle reaction and how this pertains to Elias?
Yeah, so the startle reaction, as I mentioned earlier, is a moment in time where the chimpanzee becomes agitated and they can start jumping up and down, screeching, banging on their chest. It's in this moment where the very next actions have to be carefully thought out, because if something wrong happens, the chimpanzee could attack and become aggressive.
Now, Dr. Hawkins, you are retained today to tell us about also the training that Elias had. Could you tell us a little bit more about this training?
Yeah, through reviewing the deposition of Danny Kosak, I was able to gather that Danny Kosak used a positive reinforcement schedule when training her animals, which is, in the field's opinion, the best way to do that. However, there was an issue when preparing for Midland's Television Studios appearance. You see, normally you would switch from a continuous reinforcement schedule to a fixed ratio. So instead of rewarding the animal every time they do the desired task, you will reward the animal 4, 3, just some random set time so that they don't expect a treat or a reward every single time they perform that task. Now, I noticed that in preparing for Midland's Television Studios appearance on Midland's After Dark with Alex Grace, Danny Kosak failed to transition from the continuous reinforcement schedule to the fixed ratio. And this is problematic because it increases the chance of a startle reaction occurring.
Now, could you give your expert opinion on the training and characteristics of this chimpanzee as a whole for us?
Yeah, so first to the characteristics of Elias as a performance chimpanzee. Elias was simply too old and had developed into puberty, and Elias was male, more aggressive, and he interacted with humans far more than what you would normally want to do for a performance chimpanzee, as well as that one event that resembled a startle reaction. It seems as if Elias would not have been the best choice for Danny Kosak to bring onto television. And regarding the training methods, while Danny did use the proper positive reinforcement, it was completely overshadowed by this failure to switch from a continuous to a fixed ratio reinforcement schedule.
Oh, you finished?
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Pham, cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Dr. Hawkins.
Good afternoon.
Now, on direct, you talked about some of the conclusions that you came to regarding Elias, and I'd like to talk to you about how you came to those conclusions.
Certainly.
Before coming into court today, you never conducted any tests.
No, unfortunately, Elias was put down before I was retained by MTS.
So you never conducted any field research either.
Well, in the last 2 years of my doctorate studies, I did perform field research on primates and chimpanzees at the Cassandra Phytaitis Animal Sanctuary.
I'm sorry, Dr. Hawkins. I mean, specifically related to this case, you never went into the field and did any research regarding Midlands Television Studios or Elias.
I did not have the opportunity.
And you didn't examine Elias.
No, as I mentioned earlier, Elias was put down before I was retained for this case.
And you never spoke to Danny Kozak, Elias's animal trainer.
No, I didn't. I actually reached out to you, but my request was denied to meet with Danny Kozak.
Right, Dr. Hawkins, and because you never did any of these things, you don't know what Elias's exact age was.
No, but from the exhibits that I reviewed, one of which being the biography of Elias written by Danny Kozak, I was able to gather that Elias was 10 years of age at the time of the show.
But you can't know for certain exactly how old Elias was.
No, I cannot.
And you don't know exactly when Elias started puberty.
No, I do not. 80% of chimpanzees on the males enter puberty around 6 to 7, which would have been about the time that Elias had switched into the care of animal sanctuaries in Danny Kozak.
But you can't know for certain when Elias started puberty.
Not for certain, no.
But you'd agree that age and chimpanzee development are important for choosing a performance chimpanzee.
I would agree, yeah.
And that's because adult chimpanzees that spend more of their time in captivity are more prone to aggression than otherwise.
That is true, yes.
And Elias was brought into captivity at 6 years of age.
Approximately, yeah.
And he was 10 years old until 2017.
Yes.
So Elias spent the majority of his life in the wild, not captivity.
Well, there was a previous animal sanctuary that Elias had been in property of before moving him to Danny Kozak.
But Elias didn't come into the care of Danny Kozak until at least 6 years old.
Correct.
And so Elias did spend the majority of his life in the wild.
Yes.
Now I'd like to talk a little bit about training of chimpanzees. You yourself have written several articles on this topic.
Yes, I have.
And you know that positive reinforcement is the most effective form of training a chimpanzee.
Yes, it is.
You agree that a responsible trainer uses positive reinforcement.
I would agree with that, yes.
And you know that Danny Kozak used positive reinforcement to train Elias.
Yes, but as I mentioned earlier, it was overshadowed by her failure to switch to a fixed ratio reinforcement schedule.
But Danny Kozak used positive reinforcement to train Elias.
Correct.
And you would say yourself that Danny Kozak was responsible in this decision.
In this decision, yes.
Now I'd like to talk a bit about the environment that trainers train their animals in. You'd agree that it's important for trainers to train their animals in environments similar to those they will be performing in.
Of course.
And that this would be a responsible decision by any animal trainer.
Absolutely.
Because training animals in similar environments to those they will be performing in significantly reduces the risk of a startle reaction.
That's exactly right, yeah.
And you know that Danny Kozak trained Elias in an environment very similar to that of a television studio like Midlands After Dark.
Yes, she did.
Now I'd like to talk a bit about startle reactions, which you brought up on direct. During this, you're aware that Elias went into a startle reaction on June 29th, 2017.
Yes, from all the information that I gathered, that is what I have come to conclude happened that day.
And during this time, it is extremely important that the animal is given space.
Absolutely, extremely important.
No one should make any loud noises or sudden movements.
No, they should not.
But you know from the materials you reviewed that Alex Grace reached out towards Elias while he was in a startle reaction.
There's differing accounts from what I read, but some people have said they saw Alex Grace reach out towards Elias.
That's right. 2 of the 3 statements that you reviewed say that Alex Grace reached out towards Elias while Elias was in a startle reaction.
Yes.
But only the trainer should try to touch the animal in startle reaction.
That's true.
And now I'd like to talk about the guidelines that Danny Kozak laid out addressing this. You reviewed Danny Kozak's guidelines before coming into court today?
Yes, I did.
And you'd recognize them if I showed you a copy right now?
I would.
Approaching opposing counsel would show them the guidelines, which have been marked as Exhibit 23. changed since you last saw it?
No.
And you reviewed these guidelines as part of your analysis for the plaintiff.
Yes, I did.
And you also reviewed Alex Grace's deposition.
Yes.
In that deposition, Alex Grace mentions that he was yelling with Elias on set during the time that Elias was in a startle reaction.
I'm sorry, who was yelling?
Alex Grace.
Yes.
Now I'd like to direct your attention to rule number 6 of the guidelines. And you can read silently as I read aloud. No running or yelling. Did I read that correctly?
You did.
No further questions, Your Honor. Original.
Are we entering this?
Oh, yes. We move to, defense moves to defense moves to enter exhibit 23 into evidence.
Counselor?
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay. So defense first exhibit will be number 23, the guidelines for upcoming.
And at this time, defense is open for the questions for this witness.
At this time, we request our witness to be able to step down.
Don't have to ask. I'm not going to make them stay there. That's okay though. Attorneys, don't ask. I will let them sit down. I'm not going to keep them there all day. I've got a golf game. You may step down, sir. Thank you.
Will the courtesy copy suffice as?
Yeah, this is.
Is that going
Official
forward
copy.
as well, Your Honor?
Pardon?
Going forward, will all courtesy copies suffice as evidence?
Yes. Thank you. Ms. Espin? I'm sorry, it is Espin.
Yes. The plaintiff would now like to call Ms. Alex Grace to the stand. And I also would like to double check, how much time do I have left? Because it said 9 and during the cross and then it got home to 8.
It's 8 minutes and 54 seconds.
8 minutes and 54 seconds. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
That's almost.
Yeah.
Is it Ms. Grace?
Yes.
I remind you, ma'am, you are under oath.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Certainly.
Good morning. Could you introduce yourself to the court?
My name is Alex Grace.
And where do you live?
I grew up in Beverly Hills and I have a home there, but I currently live here in Midland Hills.
What is your education?
I graduated from Corinthian Prep High School, and instead of going to college, I decided to just get a jump start on my acting career.
What is your employment history?
In 1990, I started on Broadway and went on national tour of Cases Crimes. And then in 1997, I switched over to acting in movies with my husband Jack.
With that experience, what is your current occupation, Ms. Grace?
I am the executive producer and TV show host of Midlands After Dark with Alex Grace.
Big role. What are your duties as an executive producer and TV show host?
I look over my team, just make sure everything's running smoothly. So the administrative staff and the writers, anyone else who works under me, they will come to me and make sure everything's going smoothly.
Ms. Grace, you mentioned your team. Could you explain how your team is organized?
It's based on however our show's supposed to go that day. So we have our booking talent, James Sinclair, she will talk to and just make sure we have who we want on the show that day. And we also have our writers who included Chris O'Connor.
You mentioned that you have shows. What does a typical show look like for you?
Typically, we interview celebrity guests, and then we will close the show with a musical act. But our last show we decided to have a live animal on set.
A live animal. How did this come about?
One day, I was walking around the studio, and I saw that one of my interns was watching a video of a chimp named Elias that went viral, and I saw it as an opportunity to help me raise ratings, but also give them an opportunity to get their name out there even more. And then I noticed that Elias's owner had reached out to me in the past.
Who is Elias's owner?
Danny Kosak.
All right, Ms. Grace, I want to direct your attention to the show where you had Danny Kosak and Elias on set. In preparation for the show, you were provided some guidelines by Danny Kosak, correct?
Yes.
And those guidelines were followed?
Yes.
Objection leading.
I'll rephrase.
Okay.
Were the guidelines followed?
Yes.
And you also, how else did you prepare to have a live animal on set?
So the guidelines were something that we followed, but I also wanted to make sure we had extra safety for our team. So I personally contacted 5 outside experts, as well as referenced an article that's used among the entertainment industry.
Would you recognize a copy of that article if I showed it to you in court today?
Yes.
Approaching opposing counsel with previously marked exhibit 14. Approaching the witness with the same and a courtesy copy.
Thank you.
Ms. Grace, what did I just hand you?
This is the best practices for dealing with live animals in the entertainment industry, which was published by the American Journal of Film and Theater.
And is this a fair and accurate copy?
Yes.
Has it been changed or altered in any way?
No.
The plaintiff would like to motion to offer exhibit 14 into evidence.
The objection,
Yes, Your Honor, to hearsay?
counsel.
This is not hearsay, as this is a compilation of regular activities. It's under 80317, commercial
Second.
publication.
80317, market reports and similar commercial publications.
Yes, Your Honor.
Market quotations, lists, and directories. Okay, your response?
Your Honor, this doesn't necessarily meet this exception. This seems to be more of lists and directories. This document is actually an article, and it talks about best practices for having a live animal on set.
This counsel, this appears, I believe that 17 is an exception for like stock quotes and that kind of thing. I don't know how that applies here.
Well, may I be heard?
Yes.
This is a compilation of the best practices, and I believe that one of those things in the rules of evidence say that it's a compilation of important factors, and that is what.
Or other compilations that are generally relied upon by the public.
Yes, and this is relied upon by the public as people use it in the entertainment industry when having live animals on their set.
Counselor?
Your Honor, it doesn't seem to apply to this particular instance because it's not necessarily used by the entire public. And also, the other prong would be or by persons in particular occupations. But her occupation is not animal science or working with training animals. It's only the entertainment industry.
So you say there's no foundation for her being able to testify to this as a public?
Yes, Your Honor, there's no foundation.
Response.
This is from the American Journal of Film and Theater. So this is something that is available to the public for them to use. And my client will be using this to show that she took extra precautions in preparing to have Elias on set that day.
Counselor?
Your Honor, it's not necessary to enter an article if the opposing counsel is simply using this for the practices or the acts that they use. This article is not necessary and is not going to show those actions the way that just saying the actions would. These are hearsay statements made for the truth of the matter asserted, and they are going to bias the jury by using these statements because this witness has no expertise in this field.
Counselor?
This is an exception to hearsay, or this is not because of Rule 80317. This is a list of common practices by Dr. Jordan Rosenthal about how to have a live animal in the entertainment industry.
Well, I'm going to overrule the objection, although I think you can get this in by a better exception. And I'm going to overrule it, and probably if you appeal me, I'll probably get overturned before it. But I'm going to allow it. You can go after her on cross examination.
Yes, sir.
So this, just to clarify, this is.
It is interesting.
Okay. Now, Ms. Grace, why did you choose to use this article?
I chose this one because I referenced with other executive producers, and this was highly recommended and widely used among the entertainment industry.
Chief witness. Ms. Grace, I want to talk about your rehearsal. In explaining the events that occurred at your rehearsal that day, would it be helpful for you to have a blueprint of your set in front of you?
Yes.
I am approaching opposing counsel with previously marked Exhibit 1. Approaching the witness with the same. And a courtesy copy for your honors. Ms. Grace, what did I just hand you?
This is a blueprint of my studio.
And that is a fair and accurate copy?
Yes.
And it hasn't been altered or changed in any way?
No.
At this time, time, the plaintiff would like to offer Exhibit 1 into evidence.
No objections.
So Exhibit 1 will be entered, and that's a drawing of the stage.
And, Your Honor, if I may have permission to have my witness step down for use of the demonstrative aid.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
You may step down now. And while they're setting that up, any attorney who needs to move, say this, really just don't block the view.
Could I possibly have co-counsel hold this back for me, though, because I don't know this case.
There's a clip right behind you, I think you could, no, behind.
On our
behind
team.
you.
Oh, can we borrow it?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you.
No, you can't borrow.
Well, then I'm gonna-
There's one there, but you can't have it.
Okay, that's fair.
Objection.
Oh, okay. Would you please mark where you were sitting when the rehearsal began?
I started my rehearsal by doing my monologue that I do to open the show. So represented by an A, I sat at my desk right here.
And where were Danny and Elias? Or let's start off with, where was Elias sitting?
Elias came onto the stage and sat in the chair directly next to me, which is represented by an E, and Danny sat next to Elias in the other chair, which will be represented by a D.
And when you began your rehearsal, could you talk to the jury a little bit about how you started your rehearsal? Or yeah, how you started your rehearsal with Danny and Elias?
The plan for our rehearsal, or for the show, was for me to interview Elias as if he was a human, and I was supposed to do that without Danny near us. So she got up from her seat and walked across the stage.
And that's at D?
Yes, starting at D, went across the stage, and then stopped here, which is represented by the circle.
And Ms. Grace, what happened after Danny Kosak left the stage?
Danny began using some hand signals to signal Elias when to respond to my questions, but then those hand signals seemed to set Elias off and agitated him.
Objection, improper lay opinion, Your Honor. Maybe you heard on this.
Yes, I need to explain.
This witness just stated that those hand signals started to set off Elias. This witness is incapable of making any sort of testimony that these hand signals were altering Elias's behavior because this witness isn't able to interpret these hand signals.
Yeah, Counselor, how is she not basically?
This is her then existing mental state. She doesn't she doesn't necessarily know for sure, but in her opinion, she assumed that's how she felt at the time, using her rationally based perception, that is what could have caused the startle reaction in Elias.
Counselor?
Your Honor, the opposing counsel just admitted that she doesn't know exactly what these statements are. For her to testify, it would be unfair to the defense. This simply is an improper lay opinion. She doesn't know what these statements are being made through these hand signals, therefore she cannot testify to them.
Counselor?
I still believe that because she was there and was able to see what was going on, because she had a clear line of vision, after the hand signals began, that's when Elias started to act up. A reasonable thought would be that that is what could have startled Elias.
Well, it may or may not be. I think she certainly can testify to what she saw, what she heard. That's her rational-based perception. I don't think she can give us an opinion as to what the meaning of that is, so I'm going to sustain the objection.
Motion to strike, Your Honor.
Yeah, it will be stricken and the jury is instructed to disregard.
Yes, sir.
So, Miss Grace, after Elias started screeching, what happened?
Once Elias jumped up on his chair and started to scream, it scared me, so I jumped under my desk and I hid there while everything was happening. But Elias also had jumped from his chair, ran across the stage in the same direction that Danny had gone. But instead of running into Danny, he hit Chris. and just started attacking him and scratching at him and ripping his fingers off.
And could you just clarify for the court where Danny Kosak was in relation to Chris Villafano?
Danny was standing behind Chris Villafano.
And was there an effort made by Danny Kosak, to your knowledge, to stop this attack?
From what I could see,
No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay. Mr. Klosky, do you want that left
Oh,
up?
yeah.
No, it can be taken down now.
I'll put your binder
Take
with
that
that.
down.
Thank you.
I assume you don't want cross-examination, or do you?
I'm sorry?
I do have a cross-examination.
Oh, you sure?
Oh,
Yeah.
I thought you were talking to me.
I'm just messing with you, sir. He's oblivious.
Sir.
Anytime you're ready.
Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, I'm just gonna
No.
do this one now.
I'm sorry, did we enter that? We did.
And you have a copy, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Ms. Grace, you mentioned on direct examination that you followed all of the Danny Kozak's guidelines,
yes, that's right.
and every single one.
Yes,
You'd recognize a copy of these guidelines if they were in court today, right?
yes,
I'm approaching to retrieve Exhibit 23. And approaching to retrieve Exhibit 23. Ms. Grace, I just handed you a copy of those guidelines.
yes,
And these guidelines are in the same condition as when they were sent to you by Danny Kozak.
yes,
Now, on set, on June 29th, 2017, you scheduled a rehearsal.
yes,
And during that rehearsal, at one point, you started yelling.
correct.
So you didn't actually follow all these guidelines.
Yes,
Now, I'd like to direct your attention to guideline number 6. It says, no running or yelling. Did I read that correctly?
yes,
Thank you, Ms. Grace. I'm approaching to retrieve Exhibit 23 and approaching the bench to retender. So now I'd like to talk about your ratings at Midlands After Dark. So you had been a host for 2 to 3 years.
correct.
And in your time, your ratings had dropped, right?
Yes, but that's expected over time in television, so you just have to work harder to get those ratings back up again.
Well, Ms. Grace, on June 29th, 2017, your ratings were the lowest they've ever been since you became the host.
Yes, that's true.
And so you were looking to bring some nice publicity.
Correct, yeah.
And you would say that controversy brings out good publicity.
Yeah, that was a statement I made a couple of years back. It wasn't my best moment.
So you would say that controversy brings out nice publicity.
Correct, yes.
And in fact, you actually faked your death once in order to bring out higher ratings.
I was still new to the entertainment industry, and I thought that was the best way to go about it, but I learned that wasn't the right way to go.
But that's a yes to my question, that you faked your death to bring out higher ratings.
Yes,
And you just told me that you were new to the industry, but you started in movies and on Broadway in 1990, right?
correct,
And you only faked your death in 2013.
yes,
So you'd been in the industry for 23 years?
about so, yes,
So fairly new.
right.
Now, I'd like to talk about your role at Midlands After Dark. So you are the host and executive producer.
Yes,
And as the executive producer, you oversee the talent.
yes,
Now, on June 29th, 2017, there were other guests that were set to appear other than Danny Kozak.
right,
And you were told for those guidelines that everyone on set needed a copy of those guidelines.
yes, which I sent to a listserv, and that included whoever was gonna be there that day, all the employees, all the interns, so everyone got them.
Well, I'd actually like to talk about the guests. So you don't know if the guests actually received those guidelines.
Not for sure, I didn't check, no.
And you also oversee the writing and the administrative staff.
Yes.
And prior to June 29th, 2017, you didn't host a safety briefing with these members of your staff for Danny Kozak's visit.
I did not, but in COSAC's guidelines, she said that she would hold that meeting.
Well, Ms. Grace, just to be clear, you thought hosting a meeting would be a waste of your time.
I knew that they would read what I sent them. I've never had problems in the past, so I didn't expect anything different this time.
Redirecting you back to my question, you thought that hosting a meeting with these members of your staff about safety would be a waste of your time.
I said that, yes.
So now I'd like to talk about your television set. Your niece's cat frequently roams around set, right?
Yes.
And this is where you held the rehearsal.
Exactly, yes.
So on June 29th, 2017, you started this rehearsal around 2:20.
Yes.
And you started it with Danny Kozak and Elias on stage.
After my monologue, yes.
Now, this first part with Danny Kozak and Elias on stage, you thought was boring.
What do you mean by that?
When Danny Kozak and Elias were sitting on stage with you, you were bored. You thought it was boring.
I mean, the plan was for Danny to leave, so that's what was going to happen next.
Well, redirecting back to my question, this first portion of the interview, where you were sitting on stage, Danny Kozak and Elias were on stage with you, you would say that was a boring part of that interview.
I guess, yeah, for visualization for the show, it wouldn't have been that exciting.
So that's a yes. It was
Yes,
boring.
yes.
You were hoping for something that was more exciting.
Of course, that's what I would always want for my show.
In fact, you wanted to touch Elias.
I thought about it, yes.
So that's a yes. You wanted to touch Elias.
Yes.
And you wanted to do that during the next part,
Right, yes.
to make it more exciting,
Correct.
and to make it ratings gold.
Yes.
Now, after this entire rehearsal, you sent a letter to Harper Villafana, Chris Villafana's wife, right?
Yes.
And you recognize her handwriting in that letter?
Yes.
I'm approaching opposing counsel with what's marked Exhibit 20. Approaching the witness with Exhibit 20? Or, yeah. Would Your Honor look at courtesy copy? Approaching with Exhibit 20. Miss Grace, I've just handed you the letter that you sent to Harper Villafana, right?
Yes.
Did you recognize your handwriting in this document?
Yes.
And on the very last page, the third page, that's your signature.
Yes, it is.
At this time, Your Honor, the defense moves Exhibit 20 into evidence.
Any objection?
I believe this is hearsay, Your Honor.
Counselor?
Your Honor, pursuant to Stipulation 8, this is a document that both parties have agreed to that was written by Alex Grace. Now, Alex Grace is the party representative of the plaintiff. She was introduced at the beginning of the trial as a party representative. And being a party representative under 801 D2A, she is her
So
signatures are
you're
not.
going with the party representative?
Yes, Your Honor.
None.
I rescind my objection.
Yeah, I will overrule the objection, although it's been rescinded. You may ask the question, you may. This is it.
Yes, sir. So I'd like to direct your attention to the second page. It's the first page of record. Now, in this document, you said further down, maybe if listened to rules or said yes to different animal, I don't know, I don't care. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
And then on the next page, the third page. Near the top, you said, we could have done way more. Chris could still be here. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
And finally, later on, you said, sorry again, I let everyone down. I don't feel like a good person.
I did say that, yes. A person died on my set. My best friend died. Of course I was going to feel bad.
So that's a yes, I read that correctly.
Yes.
I'm approaching to retrieve Exhibit 20. And at this time, Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor. At this point in time, the plaintiff rests their case in chief and requests a 5 to 10 minute recess.
5 or 10, you guys?
Your Honor, would we actually be able to skip a recess? Our first witness is, yeah.
I got a gig at like 3:15.
Like as Randy Hollis, or is it?
Could we need a recess desperately?
Can we take it
Could
after?
we take it after Randy
Can we
Hollis?
take it after?
Yeah,
the
that's
first witness?
totally fine.
All right, so we're gonna go with the first witness and then we'll take a recess.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Just give me the phone. You can use the charge now. Nice, thank you.
I totally forgot. I feel so sick. I know, I knew, and I was thinking, I'm like, I'll inject a hearsay so that they know that I feel like an idiot, it's okay.
That's funny. So then I gotta get. Yeah, just take I wasn't gonna let you. I couldn't lift myself. I was like,
Mr. Hollis, I will remind you that you are under oath.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
You may.
Please state your name for the court.
Hey, what's up? I'm Remy.
Could you please state your full name for the court?
So, right, I'm Remy Nirvana Hollis. My parents met at Woodstock, if that makes any sense.
And with Mr. Hollis, what do you do for a living?
I'm like a band manager, promoter kind of guy. I like to take groups that really haven't made a name for themselves yet and turn them into something big. So currently I'm working with the Hound Dogs, like a classic rock kind of band.
Mr. Hollis, were you the manager of the Hound Dogs during June 2017?
Yeah, I sure was.
How did you go about booking the Hound Dogs for Midland Television Studio?
I reached out to Alex Grace's talent booker, James Clark.
Did you go to Midland Television Studios on the day of this rehearsal?
I did, yeah. Like I said, the band's kind of new, or it was kind of new. So I figured I should go along to make sure that everything ran smoothly.
What time did you arrive at the studio?
I think it was like 11 o'clock or so.
What did you do once the band had arrived?
Well, the band got there like half an hour later, and I did all the normal manager type stuff, you know, making sure the band was comfortable in their dressing room and ready to perform. You know how rock stars can be, especially when there's 6 of them. Our lead guitarist, Jimmy, such a diva.
And Mr. Hollis, what happened next?
Well, everything was okay except our drummer Jackson was sneezing like crazy. And I hadn't seen anything like it since we'd gone to the Midland Zoo. And I noticed a monkey in the other room, so I went to find somebody about changing rooms.
Did you run into Alex Grace at this point?
Yeah, that's when I found Alex.
What was Miss Grace doing?
Yeah, she was talking to Danny Kozak.
What were they talking about?
I'm not entirely sure, but I heard Alex say something along the lines of, "You're too uptight, Danny. You're focused on all the wrong things. Stop worrying so much and think of the ratings, baby."
Did you ever make it onto the set that day?
Yeah, like a couple hours had passed, and I saw people heading towards the set, I assume for rehearsal, and I figured I should follow to make sure Jackson wouldn't be sneezing the whole time.
Did anyone at any point try to stop you from going on the set, Mr. Hollis?
I mean, no one tried to stop me, but I am the band's manager, so I think I could have got past it.
Mr. Hollis, did you see any warning signs posted anywhere warning people that there was a live animal on set that day?
Objection leading, Your Honor.
What's the leading question?
The question, let me confer with counsel real quick. He asked, did you see any signs posted?
Respond.
I simply asked if the witness saw any signs posted. I wasn't insinuating that there were signs posted.
Yeah, a leading question is one that suggests the answer. I don't think he suggested any answer. Just asking yes or yes or no. I'm going to overrule the objection. I'm going to allow it.
Your Honor, I'll restate the question to Mr. Hollis. Did you see any signs posted warning that there was a live animal on set that day?
I don't think so, no.
And I'd like to move into what happened during the rehearsal. So, what happened? What did you do once in the studio?
Yeah, so when I got the set, like I said, I wanted to make sure my band would perform okay. And so I sat in the front row, middle aisle, make sure I had a good view of everything that was going on.
Did you, were you watching Elias or the act when Elias started screaming?
Not exactly. I was actually, you know, on my phone on an app called Tinder, swiping right on some hot babes. But then I heard the monkey start screaming, so I looked up.
Well, what happened next? What did you do?
Well, eventually the monkey attacked that guy, and like any rational person during a monkey attack, I called 911.
What happened next, Mr. Hollis?
Well, eventually it was all over, and I knew that the show would be canceled that night, so I told my band to pack up, and as we were packing up, I ran into Alex. I figured I should say something to her since, you know, considering everything that happened.
I'd like to move into this conversation, talk about this conversation with Alex. Did Alex say anything to you directly about the incident?
Yeah, so before I could really say anything to her, she told me that if anybody asked, I should tell them that I
Objection hearsay?
Johnson?
May I have a moment to confer with the counsel?
Yes.
So the statement in question is from the opposing party's representative, so it is not hearsay.
Counselor? Non-hearsay, opposing party representative statement.
A second to confer with counsel. Your Honor, I stand by my objection.
May I have a moment to respond?
No, you don't need to. I'm going to overrule the objection. I think that's all clearly within one E2.
May I proceed?
No.
Let me repeat the question, Mr. Hollis. Did Alex say anything directly to you now that you guys pulled off the set at this time?
Yeah, like I was saying, before I could really say much, she told me that if anybody asked, I should tell them that I'd received the safety handout.
Mr. Hollis, did anyone ever tell you to read the safety handout, the guidelines?
No, no one ever told me.
did you ever check to see if you received guidelines?
Yeah, I did receive them. However, I didn't read them. I thought it was a mistake. I opened the handout and it said something about animal safety. To be honest with you, I thought Jameson was a bit confused because the name of the band is the Hound Dogs. I mean, they're animals on stage, but not real dogs.
Mr. Hollis, did you send these guidelines to any of the 6 members of the Hound Dogs?
No, I did not. I mean, I didn't read them myself, so why would I send it to them?
No further questions.
Can you read the book? Yes. I'm sorry, Cross, I'm sorry.
I do it. Try. I do it. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Oh. Well, when you first saw Elias, you said he looked agitated.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a monkey expert or nothing, but he looked pretty ticked off to me.
You said he was making high-pitched screaming noises.
Yeah, that's right.
After you left the room, you said you heard Danny Kosak say he doesn't feel good about this, or he has a bad feeling.
I think I might have heard him say something along those lines, but I'm not entirely sure what he's talking about.
Okay. Later on the set, later on the set, did you saw Elias? Sorry, lost where I was. When the attack occurred, did you see Danny Kosak help the victim?
I did not know. Once the attack started, I started to leave.
No further questions.
Any redirect? Walt?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Hollis, during your time on the studio that day, the day of the incident, did you see any other animals on set or in the studio?
Yeah, actually, when I was making that 911 call, I saw an orange cat right outside the studio.
Objection leading, Your Honor.
Counsel?
I'm just, may I confer with counsel?
Yes.
As before, I believe I'm not asking the leading question. I'm simply asking if the defendant saw something, not insinuating whether he did or did not see it.
Counsel?
I don't believe you can ask a question about that because it wasn't brought up in cross-examination.
I'm going to overrule the objection. The leading question has to suggest the answer. I don't think he suggested any answer. He just asked, did you see an animal that day? You can talk to him.
Okay. Ask that question because it was not brought up in your cross-examination. You can't bring new evidence in after his initial draft is done.
Your Honor, after conferring with counsel, I found out that you can't. I already knew. You can't bring in new evidence that wasn't brought up in
So your objection
cross-examination.
is beyond the scope of cross?
Yes.
Sustained. You can respond, go ahead.
So since this is relating to the attack, which our witness was talking about previously, so it is related, it is within scope.
Counselor?
It's not in relation to what he asked first.
It's not in relation to what he asked the first time, though.
I'm gonna sustain that objection. I don't think he really specifically talked about animals being on the stage or not being on the stage. So I'm gonna sustain that objection unless you've got something further.
May I respond?
Yes.
So during their cross, the opposing counsel had asked our witness if he had saw anything, like before, during, after the attack. So therefore, this is within scope because he is trying to add something that was that happened after the attack.
I will say that if this were a normal court of law, I'd have a court reporter who could read back what happened. It was a very short cross. I don't necessarily remember this, but I will allow the question. I'm going to overrule that. Ask that question.
Mr.
You
Hollis.
can recross.
Mr. Hollis, to just clarify, did you see any other animal besides Elias at the studio that day?
Yeah, like I said, I saw a cat right outside the studio doors.
Thank you. No further questions.
You were lucky on that. You probably should have gotten that. There's a good second objection. We're on recess here.
Thanks, Joe, for coming. Great. I am so early. That is a feeling that I did not want to
You got it. You got it.
Hold on, this one.
It's free real estate.
I got the look, and I was like, I better ask about this again.
Yeah. Wait, do you Alabama? I have Alabama winning this game. Just for the
I wrote down.
Well, it doesn't matter either way. I said I already gave it to her. I know. I told him I was like,
You see me get that picture over there?
Yeah, the comments and that.
Oh, that's awesome.
Bye.
So here it is.
Bye.
Then it called the timeout.
I know. 5 seconds is
We're not fired up from the mystery.
Well, I didn't want objection until like last night or 2 nights ago.
Why? You get seconds to call play. Yeah, down by 1. That's just calculus. Dude, if they can get this stopped. Yeah, this is bad. That is a charge. And those are shots, right? That's not an offensive foul. Weird rule, but it is.
Errors.
Charger, good noise.
I'm gonna steal an outlet here. You're good. Don't worry.
I can't
Yeah,
tell.
it should work.
I just had a high stress situation. I need to get my. I'm sorry. I don't think I've ever been that fired up and around before.
Yeah, so
like-
everybody on our team is a first year.
Sorry.
Besides
Oh, wow.
one. We did it last year for like 2 tournaments.
That's impressive.
They're holding in there. They're
Yeah.
yeah.
We have a lot of new people this year. Steven, who you were just up against, this is like his first time ever doing.
Oh, this is like my third like
Yeah.
one
It's your second
ever.
tournament though, right?
Yeah, second tournament.
Yeah.
third, like
Or second, I guess, one tournament, one scrimmage. Yeah.
You're doing well.
Well, I'm trying
Hang
to get
in
these
there.
objections down. I'm
That's
trying to
the
figure out how to
worst
do
part,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
The
Objections are
experience,
so
you just gotta
scary
keep
when
hearing
you
them.
start. Yeah.
It's like there's no way to teach.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get them down, and Katie's like, saying, "Oh," I'm like,
It can be overwhelming. Like I know when I first started like mock, it was overwhelming when I was at council table and people like say this, because like I can't remember, that.
I'm like, how do I argue that?
Yeah, exactly.
Most people lock up and like just stop, but at least
You're trying. I swear, I made a comment. I like really respect that you're trying because most people do just say, okay, like done, just move on. So just keep trying it. Like honestly,
that's how you learn it.
That's how you learn it, and you just like honestly fake it till you make it. Just act like you know what you're talking about, and you'll get it down. Sincerely, but you're doing well.
So the outside of the scope is going to become like everybody's favorite objection.
Yeah.
In any type of like redirect or anything.
Yeah, but
It's just
that
funny
was
that-
right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like wrote it down, and then you immediately like you guys jumped on it. I was like, yes, good, they got it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, hang in there.
You got it. You got it.
I completely survived. I don't know why, but I got just a blank. Starting with fucking start talking. I was like, damn, I can't go back now.
Yeah.
I like contact the opening.
Yeah. That's all good.
You should see how bad he was.
He traveled. Sorry.
He's the Boulder best player in the
Actually, two of my classes, right? Hell,
Yeah.
I think I saved all the legal research and writing US.
They call that a travel?
Fall. I have I'm not sure yet.
Yeah.
What a travel.
So far, the top in Notre Dame.
No, that was nothing.
Lost you.
That was a horrible call.
I'm from Chicago area.
Yeah.
I think I want to do immigration law. So Chicago wouldn't be bad, but I'm not sure. I don't know.
If you want to try to go to law school where you want to wind up living,
Yeah.
if possible. It doesn't always work out there, right? It's not critical.
I think the only more regional located law school I'm thinking about is Denver, because
Yeah.
they just think it's a full ride.
Sweet.
That's all hard to turn down.
That's hard to turn
So,
down.
yeah.
I don't know anything about their laws.
Yeah. They have an immigration clinic, which is like one of the
So that's
three things.
So that might be the way to do it.
Yeah, so that one's a big one. But, yeah, Denver.
That was.
Did you look at like George Washington or Georgetown?
He kind of looked like he could have traveled.
I'm on the.
But it looked like he was still moving when he has that. If he, it stands still when he catches it, but if he moved like he was moving.
George Washington, I think this gave me enough money off, so like, also the cost of living now.
Yeah, that's a shame because that would be like the if you do that kind of
Yeah, I got it, I did apply to do it recent, and they haven't told me the money, but they just like, they keep sending me emails with like the wrong name and like sending me things that just show that like administrative.
Maybe I don't want to be
Yeah,
there.
like,
Are we gonna win
so, I know I like, I don't know.
I don't think we have that.
Washington would be great.
Really?
They just started their immigration clinic up, I think, last year.
Because going into the Alabama game, I
Good school.
so we played somebody after that, but I thought we just
Especially if I'm not coming back here for some come
SEC's overrated.
I want to go experience it.
Yeah, something basketball at least. Yeah, that's right.
Well, at least you've already gotten options, so that's great.
What they
There's a lot of people that don't.
Oh, Jesus.
I don't want this cold
It's
weather.
like they just give it to them, and it's like,
We've had a couple days.
I know.
We've had mild winters.
Yeah, and we will, yeah. But, and we're supposed to get snow today, and it doesn't look like any snow.
No, mine kept saying at noon it was supposed to snow.
Yeah, yeah.
That
Well, I mean,
literally
I think it's
happened.
gonna stay above us.
Yeah.
Iowa, you guys would have been.
You'll be fine.
Probably Sunday and then tomorrow.
Yeah.
The thing about the cat shouldn't have come in.
yeah. They know that.
Yeah, you probably
They just thinking that was.
Oh, yeah.
For me?
No, for the. So that was a sympathy.
Oh, that's what that was?
That was great timing.
Oh, after you. Barry, you're taking a picture of us, I'm gonna put a hard stop on that. Hard stop. At least wait until I sit down so I don't look dumb.
to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Ashley Thornhill to the stand.
Ms. Thornhill, I will remind you, ma'am, that you are under oath.
May I proceed?
Please.
Good afternoon, Ms. Thornhill.
Good afternoon.
Can you introduce yourself to the court?
My name is Ashley Thornhill.
And what do you do for a living, Ms. Thornhill?
I'm a makeup artist by trade.
Is that what you do right now?
Currently, I am unemployed following the debacle at MTS.
Can you tell us what working at MTS or Midlands Television Studios was like?
Well, I was working for Alex Grace. I was promised that I was going to be the head makeup artist, but she neglected to mention that I was also going to be a personal assistant. Working with Alex wasn't easy, especially after the show started reaching a low point.
Can you tell us a little bit about what your duties as makeup artist and personal assistant entail?
Well, for makeup artists, clearly I would meet Alex wherever she planned to have shows at, on June 29th. That was kind of an impromptu practice rehearsal. So I met her there, and what we normally do is we would discuss business while I would do her makeup, so I could be better being her personal assistant. So I would also sit in with meetings and take phone calls for her, so I had to be pretty important about what was going on at MTS.
And can you tell us about how MTS was doing in 2017?
In 2017, MTS was not doing very well. Initially, it started off doing very well because Alex was just a natural behind the desk, but ratings started to slow down. We would see a spike when controversy struck. There was an incident where something was leaked onto the internet where Alex Grace had kicked one of our writers, and that was the highest ratings we had seen in ages. And after the initial surge of that, ratings went down again.
Now I'd like to talk a little bit about the case today. Do you know Danny Kozak?
Yeah, I spoke with Danny Kozak on the phone once.
What did you talk about?
Danny called me, and Danny had planned to switch Elias out with another animal, something less dangerous is what I was told. I wasn't sure exactly what all of this was about, so I informed Danny the best way to get a hold of Alex would probably just be to email her.
Did Danny express any concerns or tell you why she was planning on this?
I believe Danny said that Elias wasn't quite ready.
Did you ever tell Alex Grace about this phone call?
Yes, I told Alex Grace that about the phone call that had happened. Alex said that Elias will be there, and if anything bad were to happen, all the better for ratings.
Did Alex say anything to you specifically about Elias?
Could you rephrase the question?
Did Alex say anything more on the subject?
Oh, about Elias showing up?
Yes.
No, not that I remember.
And did you talk to, what were you doing on June 29th, 2017?
Well, I came into work to do Alex's makeup. Alex was late, which typical. And I was also handed guidelines from Kozak to hand those out, but when I got those, Alex showed up, so I didn't have time to pass them out. I gave them to Chris Villafana to pass out the guidelines, and then I went to go get to work on Alex's case.
And did you talk to Alex about anything at that time?
Yeah, we were talking about the way that the show was planned to go today. Alex made a comment that she was concerned maybe Elias was too agitated for what was planned, and that Elias would be the perfect prop for her hairdresser bit, which is where she would reach out and tussle someone's hair. Came on show, she liked to do a POTUS, so.
What did you do after that?
After that, my next job was to then transition into personal assistant, which is where I had to clean up the office and hide any signs of alcohol from Alex's wife, for reasons I was never actually told about.
Did you find anything else while you were cleaning up Alex's office?
In the office, I found in Alex's office, it was a mess, and I could tell that someone had slept there the previous evening. And I then got kicked out of Alex's office, and then transitioned to cleaning up the dressing room. And in the dressing room, I found a not skillfully hidden bottle of wine and I believe I found the printed guidelines in the dressing room, not the office, but I can't actually remember at the moment.
Had you ever seen these guidelines before?
They were actually the guidelines that I had handed to Chris Vilfana.
And had you ever read these guidelines?
They were emailed to us. Alex was very particular about people reading guidelines or reading things that were sent by email and would get pretty angry if that hadn't been done. But admittedly, I just skimmed through them.
Did you ever see these guidelines distributed around the set that day?
Not that I'm aware of.
So you never saw any signs posted, or did you ever see any signs posted around the studio?
There is signs that there would be a live animal on set. I posted 2 of those on a couple doors, but other than that, I didn't see anything else.
And did Midlands Television Studios ever meet to talk about safety on the set?
I heard Jameson Clark mention to Alex that we should have a safety meeting, and Alex kind of did Alex fashion of being like, yeah, sure, we'll do it, but there never was one.
So did anyone ever check to make sure that you had received or read the guidelines?
Not that I'm aware of, at least not with me.
Thank you, no further questions.
Mr. Barnard? I'm sorry. That's the last time I'm.
Don't be sorry.
Don't be sorry.
You're probably used to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Back. Okay.
I'm sorry.
How are you doing today, Mrs. Thornhill?
I'm well.
All right. So you were hired at MTS, correct?
Yeah, Alex convinced me to transition over to MTS with her.
And then you were fired from MTS, correct?
Yeah, you're correct. I was fired moments after my colleague and friend, Chris Vilfana, had been horrifically mauled by chimpanzees. So yeah, I was fired in probably a moment where there should have been other concern going on.
Maybe, perhaps. Though you do admit you had anger issues, correct?
I had anger issues because I had to work with Alex Grace, but since I've left MTS, I've calmed down quite a bit. I've worked on some things.
You've worked on some things, however, you have not worked, correct?
You're right. I'm working on that though.
So you're working on working, correct?
Yes, I have some contacts in Milan and Paris from when I was interning as a makeup artist, and I'm working on getting back into that.
Okay. So you did mention that you had a phone call once. You were in Alex Grace's office, and you picked up the phone one day and you heard Danny Kozak on the line, and you had a conversation with him, essentially him saying that he felt like he was unprepared and that Elias maybe shouldn't be on the set that day.
She was frantically explaining something to me, but after I explained that it was Alex's personal assistant and not her, she explained that she thought it would be better to bring a different animal because of preparation issues, yes.
Okay, and you did hear at the end, so there was a funeral, correct? And so during this funeral, you witnessed a group of MTS employees discussing some things, and you felt extremely agitated about this, correct?
I was agitated because Alex Grace did not attend the funeral of Chris Vilfana, which I thought was odd because I thought we were all very close to MTS. And I also was really offended that the people who showed up were people who had been clearly coached by lawyers and were in line rehearsing what they were going to say to Miss Harper. And it just felt inappropriate and cold to me. So yeah,
So you were close with Alex?
For a while, yeah. I mean, I worked with Alex for almost 10 years, something like that.
So you kind of did like Alex?
For a while, yeah. I wouldn't have worked with someone that long.
10 years, yeah. Okay, so you overheard also the reality here being that you were actually angry about this firing that occurred, correct? You said you would be willing to do anything to get back.
I was Yes, you're correct. I was just fired, and my friend was just horrifically murdered. So I was not in the best state of mind. I said things that I don't mean now, and I didn't mean then, and I was saying to comfort a friend.
So you,
But
so you made
hindsight,
a death threat, correct?
I never made a death threat.
You said you wanted to kill her, correct? Or do anything that could imply death, correct?
I don't think what I said could imply death.
Okay, but you wanted to hurt somebody or do something to hurt somebody.
I believe what I said at the funeral was that I should get revenge against Alex
But you would
Grace.
do anything, correct?
I would do anything.
Anything. No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
You may step down.
So you're working on working?
It's okay.
Mr. Bukowski, call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense calls Danny Kozak to the stand.
Mr. Kozak, you've been here the whole day, so you know what I'm going to tell you.
May I proceed? Please state your name for the court.
My name is Danny Kozak.
Where do you live, Danny?
Currently, I live in Ohio, but I lived here in Midlands a couple years ago.
What do you do for work?
Right now, I'm an animal trainer at the Red Hawks Animal Sanctuary in Oxford, Ohio.
How long have you worked there?
The past year or so, I think.
And where did you work before you worked in Ohio at that animal sanctuary?
Before Red Hawks, I was lucky enough to be able to open my own animal sanctuary right here in Midlands. It's always been my dream to help rehabilitate animals and even train some of them for entertainment purposes.
You mentioned that you train animals. What types of animals do you train?
I trained a bunch of different animals for Midlands Television Studios. I trained a cockatoo, a Bengal tiger cub, an ostrich, and Elias, my chimpanzee.
So, what type of training do you use to get these animals to perform the tricks you want?
Well, I use positive reinforcement, and then two different types of positive reinforcement: continuous positive reinforcement, and then fixed ratio positive reinforcement.
So, can you explain to the jury what positive reinforcement is?
Positive reinforcement is rewarding an animal with a treat every time it performs a trick correctly.
And what's the difference between the continuous reinforcement and the fixed ratio reinforcement?
So continuous is giving the animal a treat every single time it performs the trick correctly. And then fixed ratio is rewarding the animal with a treat every fourth or fifth time it performs the trick correctly.
Is this how you train all of your animals?
Yes, it is. After I got my Bachelor of Science degree in animal science, I worked at the Cincinnati Zoo, which is one of the best zoos in the world. And that's where I learned most of my animal training, and it's the only method of training that at least the Cincinnati Zoo teaches, because it's the most humane and most effective way to train animals.
So now I'd like to talk about Elias. What type of animal was Elias?
Elias was a chimpanzee, but he wasn't just your average chimpanzee. He was the sweetest, most loving chimpanzee I'd ever meet. Every morning before we'd start training, he would insist on cuddling with me at least 5 minutes before.
Where did you get Elias from?
Elias was originally from Ngogo National Park in Uganda. They don't keep very good records there, so I think he was around 6 years old when I got him, but I can't be sure.
What types of tricks did you perform with your chimp Elias?
Oh, all sorts of tricks. Elias was very talented. He could shake his head yes and no, bury his face in his hand. He could jump through hoops. He was very easy to train.
Where did you perform these tricks?
We would perform them. I had a series of educational videos on YouTube, as well as he had made over a dozen TV appearances, and even was in a couple of movies. He was in Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
And how did you get into contact with Midlands Television Studios and the people at Midlands After Dark?
I had emailed Alex Grace, I want to say a year before I actually appeared on the show, asking if I could appear with Elias. I thought it would be a good chance to gain some publicity for the animal sanctuary and maybe increase our donations.
Did Alex Grace accept that offer?
Yes, a couple months before my appearance, Alex Grace, she sent me an email and we set up a date for me to perform, June 29th.
So I'd like to talk about your preparation for that particular appearance. What type of things did you use to prepare Elias for this trip?
Well, because Elias was an entertainment chimpanzee, I spent over 150 hours with him, training him to ignore bright lights, normal distractions of a television studio. For this specific trick, I was going to have Elias do some of the commands that I had already taught him, but I was going to use hand signals, so it would make it seem like Elias was just answering Alex Grace's questions without me prompting him or anything.
And what actions did you take to ensure the set would be safe when you arrived?
Like with every other appearance that I did with Elias, I sent over my safety guidelines, and my assistant Kennedy did a brief safety meeting over the phone with Jameson Clark.
So now I'd like to talk about the day of your actual appearance. How did June 29th start?
Well, Elias and I arrived to the studio around 11. Alex Grace had come by around 11:30 to go over the performance, and she was saying things like asking if Elias could come up into her lap or if she could touch Elias, which really frustrated me because in my guidelines it says that no one should touch Elias, and that is one of the things I had my assistant Kennedy call to make sure it would be clear that no one would be touching Elias.
Did you respond to any of these questions?
Yes, I told Alex Grace once again that no one would be touching Elias and not to make any sort of sudden movement towards him.
Okay, so now I'd like to talk about the actual rehearsal. When did that occur?
I think it started later than it was supposed to. I think around 2:20, 2:30.
Can you tell me how your part of the rehearsal went?
Sure. So Elias and I walked on the stage and we sat down. I wanted to make sure that Elias was completely comfortable before I got up and started doing the hand signals. So after I made sure Elias was comfortable in his seat, I stepped off stage and Alex Grace asked Elias a couple questions. He responded with the hand signals, and then Elias started to exhibit signs of a startle reaction.
What happened after this startle reaction occurred?
After Elias was in his startle reaction and jumping up and down, I told everyone in the room to stay calm. It's very important in this situation to slowly approach the animal. You want to regain their trust. But before I could even take a second step, Alex Grace reached out towards Elias, and that's when Elias leaped off the stage and started attacking Chris Wilfon.
Ms. Kozak, What could have caused Elias to become angry?
Three things jump out to me. The first, Remy Hollis mentioned that there was a cat on set, and Elias was very territorial, so these other animals could have agitated him. Second, food on set. The smell of food is also very confusing to Elias. And then finally, apparently not everyone even received the guidelines, and I've found in the past that people like to make faces at Elias, so something like that could have angered him.
And what could have caused the attack to occur?
Well, Alex Grace egging Elias on by reaching out to touch him could have caused the attack, as well as no one stayed calm when I explicitly told them to. Even Alex Grace said that she was yelling, and finally her making that sudden movement towards Elias.
What happened to Elias at the end of this attack?
Elias was taken off of he ran off, and after the police arrived, he was put down, but it was all moving so fast, and after I heard about what happened to Chris, I just can't even imagine what it was like.
Thank you, Ms. Kozak. No further questions, Ron. Ms. Hensman?
May I proceed? Good afternoon, Ms. Kosak. I want to start off by talking about your experience as an animal trainer. You trained one other primate aside from Elias, correct?
Yes, a gibbon.
A gibbon. And you do know that gibbons are significantly smaller and not as strong as chimpanzees, correct?
Yes.
So let's talk about Elias. You got Elias when he was approximately around 6 years old, correct?
Yes, unfortunately, the people in Uganda don't keep very good records of when their chimpanzees are born, so I can't be exactly sure, but probably around that.
So that's a yes to my question.
Yes, he was probably around 6 or 7.
And to your knowledge, he had no other training as in a chimpanzee, he had no other training prior to that?
No, he was in a national park, so he got to roam about freely and didn't really interact much with anyone else.
So he had no prior training?
No.
And you are familiar with the startle reaction in chimpanzees, correct?
Yes, sorry.
It's the reaction to some fearful stimuli that causes screeching, correct?
Yes, that's why it's so important to try and stay calm and regain the animal's trust in this situation.
And you do recall that Elias exhibited this startle reaction because he saw another animal in 2016, correct?
I can't be sure about that situation. I wasn't present at our animal sanctuary when I think the incident that you're referring to occurred, so I was told that Elias may have exhibited a startle reaction, but I wasn't there, so I'm not sure.
So you weren't there, and even though you heard about it, you chose not to investigate it?
Well, the people that were there were just volunteers, and unless you're trained in animal science, because Elias also makes this board.
Ms. Kosak, I want to direct you back to my question. Your chimpanzee exhibited a startle reaction that you knew about, but you chose not to investigate it. Is that correct?
Well, I can't be sure that he exhibited a startle reaction, so I didn't choose to investigate.
Now, I want to move on to more of Elias' history. He acted out on Lord Byron Fellow's show, or Safari, in 2015, correct?
Yes, unfortunately on safari trips, because Brian Fellows didn't follow my safety guidelines, Elias exhibited a startle reaction.
And at this time, Elias was just ending puberty, correct? Back in 2015.
I can't be sure, but he was growing and developing like any animal.
And you are aware that when chimpanzees enter puberty, their canines start to grow out and they become much stronger than they are at a younger age, correct?
Yes, like every animal, they develop more.
And they are stronger than an average human.
Yes.
So you still brought Elias to perform on this show even though you knew how potentially aggressive he could be after finishing puberty?
I know it's hard to understand because you never got to meet Elias, but he really was the sweetest chimpanzee ever. And even though he had grown stronger and grown up a little bit, he was still my little chimpanzee. And safety is my #1 concern, so I didn't see anything wrong.
But you still decided to bring him onto another show after he had already exhibited 2 startle reactions in the past, correct?
Well, he exhibited one startle reaction in the past because of someone not following my safety guidelines, but he had made so many other appearances on TV shows, and I worked with him for so long that yes, I decided to continue our career.
Ms. Kosak, I want to direct your attention to the day of the show, June 29, 2017. When you arrived on set, you saw that there was food, correct?
Yes, I did.
And you didn't check to see how close to the buffet the set was, correct?
I asked to get it removed, and unfortunately, I didn't realize until after. Every studio is set up a little bit differently, but apparently the buffet was right next to it. I hadn't known that before the rehearsal, though.
But it is your job to make sure that things are in check, is that correct?
It's my job to bring my animal and execute a entertaining performance. That's why I sent
Ms. Kosak, I want to direct you back to my question. It is your job to make sure that all of those safety guidelines are followed.
It's my job to send out the safety guidelines. I trust the studios. Every studio I worked with in the past was able to follow the guidelines. If they had any questions, they contacted me. So that's normally the protocol.
Permission to approach and retrieve Exhibit 23, which is the safety guidelines. Thank you, Your Honor. And I'm going to grab one. This is just a copy of it. So these are your guidelines. And I want to direct your attention to the last paragraph before guideline #1. Follow along silently as I read aloud. If you have any questions about these guidelines, don't worry. My pal Danny will do a full safety briefing with your organization before my arrival. You can ask any questions you may have then. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
And you did not perform that safety organizational meeting, did you?
No, I did not. My protege assistant Kennedy did. I've been training her to conduct some of the safety meetings, and I had been doing this for months because I was hoping that she would be able to rise to a more managerial position.
But you would agree that these guidelines need to be followed, and you didn't follow your own guidelines, correct?
I did follow my guidelines, maybe not to exactly the letter. I didn't assume when I wrote these guidelines that I would have an assistant that I would want to train by having her do the safety briefings.
Ms. Kosak, I want to direct you back. Did you confirm that you did not follow your safety guidelines to a T?
Well, I mean, if you're saying like to the letter,
Ms. Kosak, just listen to the question and answer the question that's being asked.
You just said, when I brought up about you not being there to perform the safety check, you said, well, I don't necessarily follow the guidelines to what they say.
I said that in reference to this last paragraph in your previous question.
But guidelines are guidelines, am I right? They should be followed?
Yes, the guidelines should be followed by the studio.
And you did not perform a full safety check before bringing Elias onto the set, did you?
I personally did not.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Let me redirect Mr. Wallace.
No, Your Honor.
You may step down and for your testimony. Anything further either from the defense at this point?
Not at this time. At this time, Your Honor, the defense rests.
We are prepared, yes.
All right, well, we will move to that point. Ladies and gentlemen, jury, this is time I'll let both sides give what's called a closing argument. Please be advised that we were not considered this evidence when we go back to deliberate. That being said, prosecution, you may begin your closing arguments.
May it please the court, Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. It is because of Danny Kosak's lack of honesty, preparation, and communication with MTS that Elias lost his life. Not only did Elias lose his life, but so did Chris Villafano. Both parties lost someone near and dear to them. Danny Kosak admitted to us today that he did not feel comfortable enough with Elias to bring him on set. You've heard from other witnesses saying that Danny said, "I'm not ready. Can I bring another animal?" But he brought Elias on set anyways. Now, you also just heard Danny Kosak say that she didn't even follow her own guidelines. And rules are meant to be followed. But they didn't even follow their own rules. And that is a red flag. And so we had a burden of proof today as the plaintiff. And that was to show you through a preponderance of the evidence, meaning more likely than not, that the defendant in this case, Danny Kosak, was negligent. Both parties agreed that there was harm suffered by the plaintiff, and both parties agreed that, and we need to decide that there was direct and proximate cause by the defendant which caused harm to the plaintiff today. Which it did. Danny Kosak failed to properly train Elias. You heard from Dr. Willoughby Hawkins today that there are different criteria for what a performance chimpanzee should look like. The first one being age. Chimpanzees that have finished puberty are not as likely to be calm. They're more likely to act out. Elias was 10 years old. You also heard Dr. Willoughby Hawkins say that gender affects how a performance chimpanzee will act on set. More commonly than not, the chimpanzee attacks that have happened in the past 10 years were male chimpanzees. And I want to remind you that Elias is in fact a male chimpanzee. Elias has also exhibited other startle reactions on different shows, but Danny Kosak insisted on bringing Elias to Midlands After Dark with Alex Graves. You also heard from Harper Villafano today. She lost her husband due to the negligence of Danny Kosak not properly training Elias. Could you imagine getting a call at work? Your husband has been attacked by a chimpanzee. That could have been prevented had Danny Kosak followed his own rules, properly trained Elias. Now, the defense offered their evidence, and they also had a burden of proof in today's case. They have the burden to prove that the plaintiff is negligent, but they failed to do that today. The evidence that they brought to the table was not enough to have you guys believe that they did everything in their power to prevent Elias from acting out the way that he did. And with that, members of the jury, I ask you to find Danny Kosak negligent in this case because you cannot teach an old monkey new tricks. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I'm going to be setting up a demonstrative, Your Honor.
opposing counsel seen this?
Yes, sir.
And if you need to move to see it, it's free. Mr. Bucky, could you move that back a little bit so it's easier for opposing counsel to see it? That would be nice.
Yes, sir.
We can see it, I think.
Yeah.
That's good.
May it please the court, Your Honor, Ms. Espin, members of the jury. Rules are there for a reason. They keep us safe and out of danger. Rules are there to convey a message. And when we don't follow those rules, there are dire consequences. On June 29th, 2017, unfortunately, Midlands Television Studios chose to not follow the rules. They chose to ignore the instructions of the animal expert that was on set. Instead, they opted for ratings. They wanted to make something less boring and more exciting. And this is where the problem lies. Alex Grace didn't follow the rules. Now, at the beginning of today's trial, my co-counsel asked you 3 questions to consider as you listen to the testimony and the evidence. Those questions are crucial to this case. And that first question: did Midlands Television Studios read the guidelines? Well, this is a simple answer, because today we heard from people that were on that set that hadn't read the guidelines. Remy Hollis testified that not only did he not read the guidelines, but his 6 band members also didn't read the guidelines. Even MTS employee Ashley Thornhill, the makeup artist, she took the stand and she told you that she merely skimmed them. This is the problem, because Midlands Television Studios can't follow the guidelines, and their guests can't follow the guidelines if they haven't even read them. Now, Miss Alex Grace even testified that she doesn't know if all the guests received the guidelines. This was a management problem, and that fell to Midlands Television Studios. Danny Kozak sent these guidelines over for them to be distributed, and unfortunately, they just weren't. So this takes us to the second question: were the guidelines followed? Now, members of the jury, when you go back to the deliberation room, you'll get a chance to look at each specific guideline. But I'm going to tell you about a few that we've heard about that were broken. First, Alex Grace took the stand, and she admitted to breaking rules. She said that she was yelling on set. And when you look at the guidelines, you'll see that number 6 says no running or yelling. Then Remy Hollis took the stand and told you that there was a cat that was on set. And even in the cross-examination, Ms. Espin asked if Elias had a startle reaction due to an animal and whether he got angry. Now, Danny Kozak couldn't confirm, but she can say that animals cause Elias to be territorial, and they cause Elias to enter startle reactions occasionally. So this cat could have very well caused this startle reaction, and Miss Alex Grace knew that her niece's cat roamed the set. These are all avoidable things that Alex Grace could have taken action to prevent, but she chose not to. And that takes me to the third question: were the instructions by Danny Kozak followed? Now, Elias is starting to exhibit this startle reaction. He's starting to jump up and down and get angry. And that's when Danny Kozak said that she told everyone to stay calm. And the people in that studio, particularly Alex Grace, ignored this instruction. She ignored the instruction of no touching Elias, and she started to reach out. And that was the moment that Elias started to run towards the writer. It is very clear that the instructions were not listened to. Alex Grace was reaching out, she was yelling, causing a commotion on this television set, right after the only animal expert in the room said, "Stay calm." Her instructions were clear. Now, as the defense, we do hold a burden in today's case, because we brought a counterclaim against Midlands Television Studios. This burden is that by a preponderance of the evidence, we must meet two different elements, because we've already satisfied two of the other elements, and Ms. Espin and I have agreed that we've satisfied those on both sides. So the two remaining elements include that a duty of care was breached, and the second element, that the breach was the direct and proximate cause. So the duty of care that was breached is clear. Midlands Television Studios had a duty to follow the rules and listen to Danny Kozak's instructions. Danny Kozak can't ensure or can't force their actions to be in some kind of compliant way with her needs. Midlands Television Studios must act safely, and they failed to meet that duty. From all of the different rules that they broke and the actions they took that directly went against the instructions that were given. But more importantly, the direct and proximate cause of this attack. Now, Ms. Espin mentioned this, but she didn't mention any direct and proximate causes that could have caused the attack. So I'd like to break it down. First, we'll talk about the causes of this startle reaction. And that first cause is that no other animals should be present. We know that there was a cat on set because Remy saw a cat, and Alex Grace's niece's cat is frequently on set. Again, this causes Elias to become territorial. The next rule is rule number 2. The smell of food is very confusing. Now, this rule is very clear. It says that you can't have any food particles in your teeth or on your hands because you have to brush your teeth and wash your hands before you come into contact with Elias. That's how strict this rule is. And Midlands Television Studios did not comply with this rule. Their food was near the set in a place that they didn't show Danny Kozak. And finally, rule number 5. Because there were people on that set that had not read the guidelines, there was opportunity for people to be making faces at Elias, as this was very common. Now, next is the causes of the attack. Once again, you heard Ms. Kozak mention several possible causes, and that included rule number 13, do not egg Elias on. Elias was angry, jumping up and down, screaming, and that's when Alex Grace decided to reach out. Would a normal person reach out towards a screaming, angry chimpanzee? Members of the jury, that's for you to decide. But certainly, that's trying to egg on Elias and make that more exciting. The next, don't touch Elias. She was trying to reach out and grab his hair. Once again, the instructions weren't followed. And then finally, stay calm. Members of the jury, these are the direct and proximate causes of the startle reaction and of the attack. We have met our burden. And the plaintiff has not. They have not shown you these direct and proximate causes. It's for that reason that we ask that you find Midlands Television Studios liable. Because rules are there for a reason, and they could not follow them. Thank you.
How much time is left for rebuttal?
4 minutes and 42 seconds.
Rebuttal?
Yes, Your Honor.
Would you like me to take down the...
You can leave it up. May I proceed? The defense just brought some questions just answer some questions. The third one being, were the rules explicitly followed? As I stated earlier, Danny Kosek provided these rules but couldn't follow them herself. It said on there, my pal Danny will come and perform an organizational meeting with you guys to make sure that everything is in order. That did not happen. I can't stress to you enough, members of the jury, how important that meeting would have been to make sure, to confirm that Midlands Television Studios was ready. MTS did everything in their power with the materials and sources that they had to make sure that they would be ready for the show. Alex Grace reached out to 5 other experts. Now, the defense also talks about potential causes for the attack. Not egging Elias on. I don't think it was Alex Grace's intent to egg Elias on, but when a chimpanzee is jumping up and down and screeching, and the defendant, the owner of the chimpanzee, waits 10 seconds to do something, do you know how much damage can be done to a person in 10 seconds? Enough to kill. And guess what? It wasn't just 10 seconds that Chris was suffering. It was much longer. Don't touch Elias. Again, when it takes someone 10 seconds, everyone's scared. I don't know that anyone in this room would be able to remain calm when a wild animal is screeching and jumping up and down. Now, I want to reference exhibit number 1 on our demonstrative here, because I just want to remind members of the jury where Danny Kosek was standing as this happened. Danny Kosek was here. Chris Villafano was here. Elias had a direct line for Chris Villafano, and Danny Kosek did nothing to mediate that distance. He stood there and he watched. And for that, rules do exist for a reason. So maybe we should hold the defense accountable for that. And with that, I ask you, members of the jury, to find Danny Kosek liable, because you cannot teach an old monkey new tricks.
Anything further from either side? Send everyone out for beers, no, for.
I mean.
I'm just going to go quickly through a couple things. I got lots of notes here that you guys please share. All right. Very important, and first of all, in a real trial, I would have made a big thing out of the fact that neither one of you guys discriminated between proximate and direct cause. Most people, in fact, a lot of attorneys don't know what the hell proximate cause means. And there will be instructions to the jury about what those mean, but you might want to spend just a little bit of time just explaining the difference, or not even use the terms, because direct and proximate cause are very different. They're both important. They have to be decided. I'll let your professors explain those for you. The other thing that's really critical is don't ever say, we hope, we think, I believe. The judge, the court doesn't care what you believe or hope. And it's wimpy, right? If I'm going to say, if you want to say, I believe Mr. Skinner is ugly, it's not as effective as saying Mr. Skinner's ugly. Boom, just say it, right? When you say I think, I believe, you weaken the claim, right? Very important. Seems insignificant, but both sides did that. And the other thing is, when you're doing a close, right, a jury has to decide based upon facts and evidence, not emotion. It is grounds for a retrial or for losing on an appeal if you say in close, put yourself in that person's shoes. You can't do that, right?
I didn't know that.
That's okay. That's why I'm telling you. It's something that a lot of attorneys, if they're judging you, will will take offense with, say, whoa, that's dangerous, right? You cannot appeal to openly appeal to emotions. Okay? You can do it indirectly, but just keep that in mind. It's very dangerous, and most people don't know that. Both sides need to work a little bit better on laying foundations before you bring something in. It's not that hard. Look at the rules. I thought the foundations laid for Dr. Hawkins were done really well. That was excellent, very excellent. Only meet on cross. Some of you didn't do that. Great use of the stage demo, right? That's the way a demo should be used. A lot of times people will get up there, they'll use a demo like that, and they'll say, oh, well, this was here and that was there, but it's not clear on the record. You guys made sure they put an A, a B, a C, and made clear what you were doing on that. That was very well done. I would have made a demo out of Alex's letter. You guys use that. Put that demo up there of that letter, the things that they admit to in that letter. You're going to be able to get that in if you're halfway decent at what you're doing. I would have even used the closing, right? Because I think that's really damn the things that he says on that. I have lots of others, but this is an expert in evidence, so he can tell you about that. Barry,
I just was curious, what are your thoughts on this commercial publications hearsay exception that we saw that out there?
I don't think the witness can lay the right foundation to bring that in.
Okay.
That's all. And I think there might have been, I might have used learned treatise.
Learned treatise? Okay.
Yes, because it is. It's a publication.
Okay.
Just establish that something normally, we rely on that all the time.
Okay.
I think that's what I was suggesting would be the right way to come in.
Okay.
I let it in because I just wanted to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if you agree with that.
No, we schemed it out in class.
Yeah.
We thought,
Did we
yeah.
talk about learned treatise?
No, I have never.
I would try that first.
Yeah, but it fit the person since she was. Yeah, I can
It's
go
a
into.
hard
I
one.
can go into why we decided that way, but yeah, we.
Right. So anyway, I thought that was a little better round in the first round. I thought, I thought the segment where Matthew was directing Easton and the cross-examination, I thought everybody did a great job there. I thought, Matthew needs to remember to say no further questions. Other than that,
I thought it was my breath.
He just walks back.
Other than that, I thought that was really a great segment, all three of them there. So, but anyway, you've got your ballots here, comment sheets and stuff. So,
So just some, I guess, for overarching comments. You guys, I know some of you, this is like your first round ever, but as you move forward, I think that the biggest improvement you can make is just to your guys' confidence and how you're presenting. A lot of you came up here and kind of shuffled around on your feet a lot, lost your place and things like that. And that's just going to come with more preparation. So doing these like scrimmages and stuff is great before the real thing because you can iron out those details. But don't continue from this and like keep doing the same thing. Like recognize maybe where you lost your place or stumbled a little bit and brush up on that section of the affidavit or those questions or whatever. Because first and foremost, this stuff is more about presentation than anything. And if you just stand up here and look like you know what you're doing, that's going to benefit you a lot more than anything else we can tell you. I thought that the themes for both teams could be used more effectively. For example, you guys, your rules exist for a reason. Her direct examination would be like an easy, natural place for her to say that. Like I send these rules to them for a reason. They need to read them so they don't do these things, right? So there are some missed opportunities with that kind of stuff. But just as like a base, I would say, you open with it at the beginning of your opening, you repeat it in your opening, you end with it with theme in your opening, If you can get it naturally out during trial, do that, and then at least 3 times in closings too, just so you're really pounding your theme. And that's the one thing that the jury remembers. I also have a lot of specific stuff on here, which I will give to your coaches. I don't know how useful it's going to be because my handwriting is not that great. And also, I like writing sentence fragments because they're just reminders for me to say something. So
He thinks in frame.
Right, yeah. not really. Anyway, yeah, so I do think that as far as the evidentiary stuff goes, we're talking about the learned treatise. That's the next one, right?
Yeah.
So I do think that that would be the better one to go with. However, I think you're still going to have the same problem of being able to have that witness lay the foundation that it is in fact laid the foundation. So yeah, you might not get that in. The biggest thing about that though is you worked so hard to get it in, and then you didn't ask any questions about it. So if you're gonna go through all that trouble trying to fight for it when it's in kind of a gray area, make sure you use it in some way on the both the direct and the closing. And if you're not going to use it, then don't fight for it. Then you don't have to worry about it. But yeah, I don't know if you guys have any like questions or anything about your rules. Ask me. I'll stick around for a little bit.
I guess my just overarching comment for this is for both sides. Like we've been struggling with this a lot too. That I think would help definitely with foundation and then also with confidence is just making sure your opening, closing, and then all the examinations just have some sort of structure. Everyone says this, like, pick your 3 major points that you're going to talk about, and then just like follow each major point. Like if you get totally lost in one of your points, at least you know what you're going to next. And that way you also don't have to totally have, everything written out. Like you can play off of, where you're going next. So I think that would definitely aid you. With like closing, for example, I just in my mind always have a structure when it comes to closing. Like I know after I give a little, rewind of what the story was, I'm going to touch on something that like every witness said. So as long as you have some sort of like mental roadmap, even if you get tripped up and you lose your spot, you kind of know where you need to take it. But actually, I agree with what George says about the confidence, but I do think all of you guys really did have great presence nonetheless. I don't know, I think you have the confidence, you just need to know like what to do with it. I'm sorry, what's your name?
Matthew.
Yeah, Matthew started off a little bit shaky, but then like you got into that like little exchange with her about working, and it was so interesting to watch. But like you really, that's exactly what a crossing attorney should do, like own the courtroom, and that's exactly what you did. And I could tell that you were so much more comfortable there. So, just like work with what you have because you guys have it. You just need to like nail it basically.
Great eye contact too with the jury.
Yes,
on points that were important, you would look at the jury and points when you were even asking your questions, which is very good. And don't get upset about breaking out and laughing in a situation like that. It happens sometimes. I was in a situation once where there were 3 attorneys on our side, 3 attorneys on the other side. It was a labor arbitration and an arbitrator. And the opposing attorney said something that was absolutely ludicrous. And the people on our side, I started giggling, and my co-counsels both started giggling, and we couldn't stop. And we giggled, and everybody looked at us like we were crazy. Finally, my co-counsel said, Your Honor, could we have a moment to settle down? And I said, yeah, we actually left and went out in the hallway and roared. It happens, and I've seen it happen. There are lots of judges that will use levity in trial and not be real formal. And there are some that will be a real pain.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah. One other thing I heard, and I heard Katie do this, and maybe a few other people. Small point, but you were arguing. You said, Your Honor, this is not hearsay. It falls under, and then you gave an exception to the hearsay.
Yeah, I realized that.
I think a better way to argue that is that it is hearsay, but it falls within an exception to the hearsay rule. Yeah. Small.
I had some things I remember, just overarching comments too. I think both teams need to redirect more.
Yes.
There's some opportunities to redirect. For example, pick on you guys because I know you guys personally, but when you when she was who was no you.
Hi.
You're like you made a death threat and you're like, no, I didn't. You didn't make that. You didn't say you're gonna kill anyone, did you? No, and just have her explain it a little more. Just things like that. There's just like little opportunities that you can do to mitigate. I also think.
I was also
I also think everyone could benefit from slowing down a little bit. Both attorneys and witnesses, openings and closings, just everything across the board. If you think you're going too slow, go a little bit slower than that, and you will seem more natural. It won't feel as natural to you, but everything will seem more conversational, especially on direct. Right? Someone answers your question, and then you immediately ask the next question. That's just like a telltale sign of this is scripted, and they know exactly where they're going with this.
And the witnesses too. The witnesses
right.
Pause, particularly on cross-examination. When they ask, oh, I don't know. Let me think. Did I really say that? That's good.
And then the last thing I was going to put, just because this is I've only seen this case one other time, and I don't know everyone's names, and I'm also really bad with names, the character names. So whenever you're referencing or asking about witness names, it's really beneficial to label them as something. So, Elias the chimp, Danny the trainer, Alex the studio exec, or the personality, or whatever. Just like labeling them so it can kind of help people that once you get to regionals will have never heard this case before. You guys have beat it to death, so it makes sense in your heads. But remember that the people you're presenting to will not have seen it ever. So,
and you guys, your theme is fine, but don't call it a monkey. You know it's a chimp. It's fine for Joe to do that. It's kind of funny because he doesn't know a chimp from a monkey, but you guys do. It should be a chimp. And you guys need to tell Joe, I like his character, but that initial slouching doesn't work. Any attorney worth their money would have coached him. You don't slouch up there. A judge will get that'll turn a judge off right away. I mean, I thought at first, oh, this is going to be horrible, but then he sat up and then he was decent. But that first part is no. Good luck, guys.
Thank you all so much for coming out here.
Thank you for having us. It was totally necessary.
And you guys need all of us to coach.
You're not wrong. Thank you for having us.
Your blood was a bottle. In fact,
I thought so.
I'm going to get about 5 minutes worth of juice. Leave it plugged in. Yeah, plug me in here. Mizzou's killing it right now. 8-0? Oh, really? Yeah, we're up by like 30 points. Good deal. Yeah. Yeah, they need that game bad. Yeah. I don't think they can manage to lose it at this point.
Elias was ripping his fingers off.
He went straight to the fingers. Yeah, Mizzou's up by like 30. Yeah, no, I turned it on there towards the end.
I'm sorry? Don't tell me what to do.
Good round. Good round, man.
Hey, good round, man.
Thanks, bro. I told my
It's either, so it's not too long.
And then,
genuinely stressed
like,
out, so I actually got certain
I wanted to-
don't know how it's going. Yeah, this was great when I was talking. I sat there and also
stressed out. I was sitting there. I was like, you can't do that.
Thanks to you too.
I would have, I could have turned around and expert when you realized that so well. Like, I have other is like a real professor.
Yeah, and I'm like, what are they gonna do? I haven't seen it in years. Yeah, I know she wouldn't have done
I'm like ready to talk about your candidates. Our grades, and then send that to
Barry, stop. Barry, no. Where's my phone?
It was over here.
Oh, I was ready.
Go for it.
Oh, no, here it is.
Then I'd like to amend my